The Splatoon 2 Final Fest, Chaos vs. Order, has come to an end with Chaos reigning supreme. I absolutely think this will have some sort of impact on the Splatoon 3 story. In this video, I want to discuss exactly what I think that impact may be, so let's talk about it. Splatoon has always taken place in a post-apocalyptic world. Honestly, the games always have darker stories than I would think most people would expect. So, for those of you who may not be in the know, here's a bit of a recap. The first game was the result of rising sea levels sinking human civilization, which led to squids that eventually evolved to become inklings. An octopus is octopi? Who really knows, evolving to become octolings and octarians. These new species came up to the surface when the sea levels eventually receded again and lived in peace for a long time until the sea levels once again rose, forcing them to fight for the little territory that remained in the beginnings of the turf war, albeit more in a life or death sort of way rather than the sport-like event it is now. The octolings and octarians were forced underground, and that was the source of Splatoon 1's story, and largely the same for Splatoon 2, which I won't spoil. You should play both of them if you get the chance, if you haven't already. The only other story detail I think we need for this video being that the events of the Octo expansion led to Octolings being allowed into Inkopolis again. And the most relevant thing to this video, coincidentally, the Splatfest. The original game, just like this one, kept the player base active with regular Splatfests, and again, just like this one, eventually came to an end with a larger than life topic to wrap things up. In the case of the original game, Callie vs. Marie, that end result ultimately rippled into the story of Splatoon 2. Back then, we had no idea that that last Splatfest would do what it did for Splatoon 2's story. Now though, with that precedent set and the more direct story lead that I think there is with the Splatoon vs. Order topic, it seems that that will be the ultimate purpose for the final result of Final Fest. Were it to come full circle and place us in the immediate aftermath of a new catastrophic event of some sort because of a Splatfest makes a lot of sense to me. Honestly, it feels like they were forcing our hand no matter how things panned out. There are plenty of stories on both sides of the coin where a utopian or dystopian future led to disaster. It just so happens that this time around we got Mad Max rather than the Hunger Games. I think this new world order will continue to blur the line between Inkling and Octoling. With there now being total anarchy, subsects of both species will form, with some being evil and others being good, and ultimately I could see the big twist of the game being that Pearl and Marina did indeed stay together, but they ended up turning against Inkopolis, becoming the villains of the game, and the twist within that twist will be that Pearl is the voice of reason, and Marina, who's now completely committed to the idea of chaos, initially to support Pearl, but ultimately goes too far because she grows to love it. I mentioned this being something that I wanted in the last Splatoon video that I made, but I think Splatoon 3 could be the perfect time to introduce a co-op component to the story. It could lead to new mechanics being introduced, like Octoling Ink operating differently from Inkling Ink, and that would require players to mix and match those attributes to clear stages. Or maybe they introduce a portal-like ink mechanic where one player shoots a pool of ink that can be linked to a pool of ink that's shot by the other player. Or since we'd now be in a world where both Inklings and Octolings are the opposition, there will be times where one player could infiltrate their species base while the other has to rely on stealth until their partner clears a path for them. I think there's a lot of ways this world could use cooperative gameplay in interesting ways. If they don't want to go in this direction, they could just as easily make a new species to play as that could break up the chaos that's now brought about by the Octolings and Inklings. There aren't any ink-based creatures that I can think of to fill that role, but there are plenty of amphibious creatures that could theoretically fill the role with the help of some Squid Lab tech that produces ink for them that they can swim through. And maybe the introduction of a new species would also lead to some unique game mechanics of their own. To be honest though, I would much rather prefer the co-op option, but who knows, maybe they could meet us all in the middle and provide a co-op and single player option to the campaign. Let me know your thoughts on that. What would you prefer for the campaign, single player or co-op? And while you're at it, if you're enjoying this video, why not give this video a like and subscribe so the pesky algorithm knows that you like it too. The story has historically been a much smaller focus for Splatoon though, so what may Splatoon 3 do in its more more prominent modes. First of all, I think it should be a priority to make playing with friends less of a headache. And in saying this, I partially understand why Nintendo seeks to limit your ability to freely play with friends. Playing in a game against a group of friends when you're on a team full of randoms can feel unfair. But that's where matchmaking should come in. It doesn't make sense to have that be a thing that happens regardless, just like they shouldn't have a room full of level 40s in a room with a level 5. These are both things they could fix, and they could do so without leaving it up to chance like they do now. Match up players in lobbies with friends against other players in lobbies with friends. Take their combined skill levels into consideration and not just their level. That can be gamed easily by making new accounts. Take their relative win ratio into consideration when placing them in matches. The Splatoon player base is more than big enough where segmenting rooms in this way wouldn't affect the time it takes to create matches. It would be a win-win situation in my opinion. Another improvement I think they should make to the existing formula is taking a note from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Smash Bros. Ultimate's book by filling the spot left by players that drop out of the game with bots, so it's not an inevitable wash for teams unfortunate enough to lose a player. As far as the modes that we could be playing in particular, the current mode should obviously return, but I'd also like to see them expand on these even more. For instance, I for one would like to see modes that aren't team-based be introduced. Nothing about the core gameplay mechanics of Splatoon dictates that each game mode needs to be team-based, contrary to what some people may believe. So I think just like they found a way to create a single player experience, they could figure out a way to create a non-team based competitive experience, even if that just means one free-for-all mode like deathmatch or even a free-for-all turf war. I know I'd personally play Splatoon 2 a lot more often if I had the option to succeed solely based on my own merits rather than the success of a team full of people that I don't know. Team play is great, but there's no reason team play has to be the only way to play. To walk that back a little bit, I do still think a cooperative wingman mode would be great for competitive and would further fit the theme of chaos and could be a good secondary place for whatever cooperative mechanics they come up with if they end up doing the co-op campaign I talked about. To go even further than that, a battle royale mode also makes a lot more sense. A chaotic Inkopolis is the perfect setting for a mode for something like this. I mentioned a lot of this in the last Splatoon video, but for those who haven't seen that, finding ink reserves would fulfill the search for weapons that's common with this game type, and the rising tide would serve as the closing circle. It's admittedly less of a trend now, but that would be just like Nintendo to jump on board with something with their own twist when everyone else had their fill. Online play in Splatoon also has a strictly cooperative component, starting with Splatoon 2's Salmon Run, which I think could get an easy improvement simply by allowing players to choose the weapons they want to use, even if that means you get paid less for clearing the waves of salmonids than you would if you were assigned random weapons. I get some people find it to be more fun to try weapons they aren't familiar with, but I personally get turned off of playing Salmon Run when weapons I don't like using are prominent, and people I typically play this mode with have voiced the same concern, so I know having the choice would be appreciated by a portion of the fan base at least. On the subject of gameplay in Salmon Run 2.0, I think they should allow for difficulty scaling that would make it possible to do Salmon Run alone or with only one friend or two or the full 3 rather than requiring you to play with a group of random players when you can't fill out the slots with friends. As far as completely new changes, I think they could introduce the idea of humanoid salmonids akin to Inklings and Octolings and use them as mini bosses alongside the pre-existing ones. I guess they could be the playable character for Splatoon 3's single player campaign, but I want to know what you guys want outside of that. What other character types do you think would fit in that scenario? As I'm sure people have already thought to comment on this video, Splatoon 2 director Hisashi Nogami recently spoke to Famitsu magazine and said that Nintendo hasn't yet started thinking about what comes after Splatoon 2. Personally, I don't think that means much though, if I'm honest. The development of Splatoon games hasn't taken very long in the past. The original Splatoon was completed in less than a year. Splatoon 2 took a little over 2 years, so while it may seem like it'll be a while before Splatoon 3 takes shape due to the timing of when they started it, I think it'll be sooner than they're letting on. The final Splatfest for the first Splatoon game concluded in late July of 2016. The year after, we got Splatoon 2. I don't think it'll be that quick this time around, and that's what I think Nogami is getting at with his comment. I also don't think it'll be any later than 2022. Does that mean Splatoon will still be a once per console generation type of game? Maybe, maybe not. Like I mentioned in the latest episode of our weekly podcast that you should check out in the rank card at the end of this video, Splatoon is still a pretty new franchise. That precedent hasn't been well defined enough to know if it'll take a Mario route where we get multiple games in a console lifecycle, a Zelda route where we seem to get closer to 2 mainline games every console cycle, or Smash Bros where we get 1 per lifecycle. Let me know your thoughts on all of that and anything that you want in the next Splatoon game that I didn't mention. And if you're not already a Splatoon fan, what would bring you in? Why aren't you one already? Also, to continue the trend from last video, let's have another fun question. Do you like seafood? What's your favorite kind? If not, why not? Don't forget to do all the normal stuff that I would tell you to do, like the video, share it with a friend that you think would enjoy it, and if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell for new videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. New podcasts every Saturday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on a different channel that's linked in the card like I said earlier in the video. You should subscribe to that too. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.